Today I am joined by composer and pianist Billy Childs. Billy has toured all over the world performing jazz piano, and he has won 4 Grammys for his compositions, as well as earned 13 Grammy nominations. His music has been commissioned by the LA Philharmonic, the Lincoln Center Jazz Festival Orchestra, Monterey Jazz Festival, and the Kronos Quartet, just to name a few. Billy offers wonderful insight into his creative process and how he overcomes stressors, including, of course, the reality of the pandemic and the ongoing police brutality and systemic racism in this country. We talk about how Billy returns to writing amidst this very difficult time period, and also the internal pressures that he puts on himself and how he works through with consistency and practice to return to his writing process. Hi, Billy.
Hi,
How are
I'm,
you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm doing pretty well.
As well as can be expected.
So I saw a couple of your interviews, particularly the one with the LA Master Chorale,
Right.
since the pandemic started.
hmm
And I was just very moved and kind of touched by how open you were about how this is a hard time to write. And I know you just finished your violin concerto, so congratulations on
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, don't you think so?
Yes. That's why I'm doing this.
Yeah, I know. I know. I mean, that's kind of the whole theme of this thing is to stay focused and to stay sane and to try and do things to keep motivated and to keep inspired. I mean, this pandemic is pretty much what it forces us to do goes against the very thing that we need to do as musicians, which is like to connect with people. I mean, if you can't physically connect, you know, if you can't be in the proximity of people while your music is being performed, while you're exchanging ideas, then that goes against everything that is important in music. I mean, it's about transferring a message, a healing message, hopefully, to other people, from what springs up in your mind. So it's really hard. I mean, at first, when this first started getting crazy, like in April, early April and stuff,
Yeah.
it started making you ask a lot of existential questions, like, am I even necessary?
Hmm.
I mean, when people are getting something that's killing them, it makes you start thinking that. But then, you start thinking that music is, I mean, that music is necessary. Art
Yeah.
is necessary. Museums are necessary, for the for the essence of a society, for the sanity of a society. So that kept me going for a while, but it was tough. I think the need for human expression, you know, the need to express yourself and the need to receive that expression from another human being is is not going to go away. It's part of our DNA. Well, the other thing that's difficult is not seeing the end of it. I just finished this violin concerto, but to what end? You know,
Right.
uh, and it's we're talking about, and actually it took maybe like 10 months, and the reason it took 10 months is because when I should have been finished in like April or something,
Hmm.
but this whole everything that was happening in America at that time kind of distracted me from the virus to the racial protests, to it's an election year and thinking about that, you know. Um, so it was very distracting. So it took a long time, and then I finished it, and I'm thinking, okay, I finished. Boy, I hope I sure get to hear it. I knew back in April it wasn't going to be premiered in July, so I just dragged my feet. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you're doing the same thing. That's
Yeah.
a good thing, by the way.
You think so?
Yeah, because I'm very happy with what I ended up with the violin concerto. I
Okay.
dragged my feet and only composed when I was ready to compose. Just like jazz is in my, body, so it's always going to inform my music, even if I'm writing, serial music, or, pointillistic or for some percussion ensemble or something. Jazz is always going to inform it in some way. And being black is always going to inform my music in some way. So the racial tensions that have now been exacerbated by this video is nothing new to me and nothing new to any composer who's black or of color. When Philando Castile got shot, do you remember
Yeah.
Castile? Yeah, he got shot in his car with his girlfriend looking and their child looking in the back seat, and it affected me deeply. I wrote a couple of pieces about it, but one piece was a piano and violin piece for Rachel Barton Pine, um, and but the other, I wrote a poem. I wrote this poem because I was very angry. It inspired me to write this poem, which pretty much addresses everything that I thought was an ill in this country that related to black people. Now that I've done that, I want to expand on that more. Now that these events have happened, I have ideas of what I want to do as a project. And it has to do with, how do we get how do we ultimately heal this or bring together, erase this schism in America that is, kind of making the country implode. Denial of this original sin of
Hmm.
America called racism is not gonna do anything to heal. That has to happen first, and then
Right.
um, once that happens, healing can begin. And I want my music to address that. I want my music to talk more about that. I think that there has to be, you know, some music that speaks to that. So I want to do that.
Are you saying your music is going to speak to that through a combination with your poetry, or do you? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Sometimes it helps if there are words, because if you're talking about specific things, it's it's easier to address it with words. I had a
Hmm.
commission where I had to address human trafficking, and I had to write a piece for a big band about human trafficking, and for the life of me, I
Big
couldn't figure
band.
out, yeah, I couldn't figure out how to
Yeah.
make this work with big band, So what I had to do was I had to listen to a lot of testimonials of victims. I scoured the internet. I actually met with activists in this field, and it led me to the conclusion that I had to write words. I had to write a song, you know,
Right.
and have the song accompanied in a way that is not a traditional big band, with celebratory like big brash, like shouting brass and all
Right.
that. I had to do it in a way that was, served the song, and so the only way I could get to it was with words, and I
Hmm.
think with these issues, I think I'm going to have to use a lot of words.
Yeah. Yeah. Does it feel like music is not enough to speak to it?
Well, I don't think that's the case. I'm not saying that. I
Yeah.
think that when you're going to get specific
Yeah.
and the concepts that you're getting specific about are layered. They have a lot of, as with racism, we're dealing with black, white, Latino, Asian. We're dealing with America. That's complex. I
Yeah.
don't think just writing a piece of music,
Right.
instrumental music, will adequately convey all of the complexities Maybe it could in the hands of, you know, someone who saw clearly how to do that. I'm just saying, I need to deal
Yeah.
with it with words.
Do you think about, I mean, I imagine this is a question you've faced throughout your life, but particularly now, do you think about kind of which organizations to partner with that are really going to support you for who you are, as opposed to like kind of jumping on this as being a hot topic issue, or being used as a token composer? Do you think about that?
No,
Okay.
I think if they feel like that's their reason that they have to give me the commission, I'll take the commission, you
Okay.
know, and then I'll just go in there. But I never looked at myself. Uh, I, I look at myself as a black man who composes music. I don't look at myself as a black composer. You
Mm,
know, like uh, there's the composers and then there's the black composers. You know, I don't think anybody, and I'm sure you don't look at yourself as you look at yourself as a woman who composes music, not as in this select area of women composers. You know,
right.
I mean, I'm sure it makes your skin crawl when someone says, "Oh, Julia Adolph is a great woman composer."
Yeah.
Uh, you know, yeah, you don't want to think of yourself. You want to think of yourself as in the whole. Um,
Right.
but at the same time, you can't deny you're a woman, and I can't deny I'm black. You know,
How do you kind of stay inspired or reconnect? I mean, you did finish the violin concerto, so how did you do that?
um, you just you, being inspired um, is something sometimes you have to just grab. You just have to keep doing something. It's like practicing. Through repetition, you just get better. And through, it's very tiring mentally to think of the same, to try and solve the same problem that seems unsolvable but has to be solved.
Right.
Um, uh, it's mentally exhausting, but you have to just keep doing it until you solve the problem. And you just keep looking at the same thing
Yes.
until, oh, something occurs to you, you
Yeah.
know. Let me look at it this way. You look at a slightly different angle and it changes the whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
And, and that's exciting. It's hard to, when I was in my 20s, when I composed and I got a great idea, there was an excitement and I was, revved up. And I'm looking for more. Those kind of events are happening fewer and far between, but they still happen.
So how do you generate them when they're not, so when you are mentally exhausted, have you developed a practice that kind of helps jumpstart, reconnecting to that image?
Not really,
Yeah.
just I keep looking at it until I keep banging my head against the wall until, the wall breaks apart. Um, I mean, there's a couple of things that I try, like um, if there's, sometimes when you're composing, you're saying, "Oh, I'm writing all of this part so that I could get to the money part, the really great part that I know how that's going to go, and it's going to be incredible. It's going to blow people away. But let me do this stuff first, and then you get to that, and then you finally get to, and oftentimes actually." The money part is not as hip as you thought it was, and it's actually the stuff that led up to it, which is really cool. But sometimes when you get to that part, um, nothing that you're trying to write seems to work,
Right.
right? So you're like, oh man, I thought this was gonna be so cool, but I can't figure out what to do. A lot of times, what I do is I'll just go the opposite way. So if it's supposed to be a very dense, highly contrapuntal part that has a tutti section, with a lot of orchestration and a lot of activity, Um, I might just go the other way and make it very sparse and very simple and very, with a solo instrument or something, and just kind of a pad that accompanies it. I'll try that.
Do you think that, I mean, this question's coming from my experience writing, but do you think that there's some sort of like pressure or expectation that you're putting on yourself for that money moment? That somehow like the freer stuff leading up to that like is more free because there's less of an
Of
expectation,
um,
or you're more kind of going with the flow?
yeah, now I'm old enough, and I think I've gotten a little bit of wisdom to where I don't take any part of the composing process for granted, you know. So I give equal weight to everything that I'm writing, um, or everything, I try to give equal weight. Um, but I've just put, I just put extraordinary, enormous amounts of pressure on myself anyway. It's just how I am.
Yeah.
I'm kind of OCD about the 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 structure, the themes, the. I'll work on two measures for 4 days.
I will too.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
too.
You But sometimes, I'll get like 30, 40 measures in a day.
Right.
Um, but those are that's that's usually I have a thread and then I go with it and I know exactly how it's going to go. But sometimes on those parts where I just can't figure it out, um, and at those moments I hate composing, you
Yeah.
know. But I don't really hate it. I just hate that I can't think of it. It's frustrating. It's like playing chess and always getting checkmated. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm anybody who's a prof. I'm sure you do too. You know, um, it doesn't matter if there's a deadline or not. I just put pressure on myself regardless, even to the point where how I notate it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even like when I write everything in finale now, but when I hand wrote my scores, um, I would erase it even if it was perfectly legible because it didn't look right, you know.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
like the note would be slanted too much, you know. I'd have to like erase it so it'd be more circular, like round. Now, that's OCD, you know.
I understand
Yeah.
that.
I mean, you look at my like, okay, this is a bassoon sonata I wrote back in 2003. Um,
Oh, wow. That
very,
is beautiful.
you know,
You're using a ruler, aren't you?
no, no,
No? That's
uh-uh,
your freehand?
uh-huh. I just love doing that. You
Do
know.
you put the same kind of pressure on yourself that you do when you're writing as when you are performing? And specifically, maybe with improvisation, how does that work with your piano performance?
Yeah, I do. I do put the same kind of pressure on myself. Like I like to have a glass of wine before I play a gig, but I'm doing that less and less because, you know, as the music gets more difficult that I write, um, I'm finding out I need all my hand-eye coordination. Yeah,
Important for the piano.
yeah, yeah. So that's an indication of me putting pressure on myself. But yeah, I do. I really, I get nervous.
Yeah.
Sometimes if it's a situation that I'm uncomfortable in. I'm not a concert pianist, performer. Um, I can do that if I have to, but it's really nerve-wracking for me to be in a situation where every note has to be exactly right, you know. I
Even
remember,
in,
oh, go ahead.
oh, just even in improvisation?
Well, no, not in improvisation because there the idea is that you're composing spontaneously, and the idea is you're going for things that are different. So it's, I mean, you don't want to be sloppy and just every other note is a mistake in your
Mm-hmm.
solo, but you want I think the spirit there is to go for things that are new. And I actually think mistakes are proof that you're improvising, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I love that. Yeah.
uh, so, uh, yeah, I put a lot of pressure on myself. I put a lot of pressure on myself about everything, though.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I have, and it does kind of affect your whole life, when you have that mindset. So,
yeah, yeah, right.
do you have, other than the glass of red wine, do you have other things that you do to kind of help you unwind before you write or before you perform?
No, I'm usually excited by whatever project that I have, and then I just go into it. Really, I don't really ever unwind from music, which is can be hard on a relationship, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
uh, my wife for 25 years, uh, she did, like incredible with like having patience with my, kind of like going into my own space, because that's what it is. It's a relationship. Composing
Yeah.
composing is kind of you have to explore yourself a lot, and it's a very solitary existence sometimes, and it's hard to let other people in,
Yeah.
to that. And so it's yeah. So I never really unwind from music. Music's always kind of going on in my head,
Yeah.
um, and I have to kind of dim it down to do other things. But like, for instance, like going in, like I love going to Huntington Library. I'm looking at a beautiful row of flowers or a beautiful row of trees, and I'm thinking of what it sounds like in my
Mm-hmm.
head
Mm-hmm.
musically.
Yeah.
Um, it somehow relates, and it's hard to turn it off.
Yeah, I understand that. I've heard you say that, well, and you mentioned it earlier in this conversation that you want your music to be a place for healing. I don't hear a lot of composers say that as sort of their number one thing that they want for their music.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an afterthought, but anyway, I love that, and I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about what that means and how you try to achieve that.
Well, I mean, there was a guy who came up to me. I did an album of, kind of reimagining of Laura Nyro music. For those of you who don't know who Laura Nyro is, she was a singer-songwriter in the '60s and '70s who was a great influence on me. She was like on the level of Joni Mitchell, Paul Simon, Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen. Um, these kind of she was up there, and I did an album where Larry Klein, who's a great producer, he and I collaborated on this, and we um, did this album where I rearranged all these songs, and he produced it. Anyway, there's a guy whose wife who said his wife was dying of cancer, and took and he took her to see our concert at Disney Concert Hall, and he said it was one of the last um, great things that they did together. Really, it made her feel really good,
Oh,
I mean, it really gave
yeah.
her. So that to me is a healing thing. It's not really, it didn't heal her of her cancer, but
Right.
it helped to make her life a little better in her last days, and and it was important to him. He told me this at a subsequent concert that I did at LACMA, and I never forgot it. When people get something out of the music um, that makes their life better, um, that's my goal. That's what I want. It's why I do it. And the way I found to do it is I think people, my way of doing it is people gravitate toward melody. To me,
Yes.
the most important things to me are melody and structure, and when I mean, because when you have a good structure, the music flows in such a way that it keeps the listener's attention. I think once you can engage people on that level, and you can get them completely involved in your story that you're trying to tell, and the story is something that makes them look truthfully at things or look at themselves differently in a better way, then I think, that's my goal anyway.
Hmm. So, how do you create with music a story that people can see themselves more truthfully?
Well, I mean, first of all, the first thing I tell students is that you have to know what the story is first. I think you have to know why you're going to write this piece or what you're trying to um, do with this piece, what kind of emotion you're trying to evoke.
Hmm.
You have to be clear on that, I think. Um, and then, it doesn't have to be an exact program,
Right?
um, but at least the notion has to be strong. I want something dazzling that's going to bowl people over. I want something really introspective that's going to make people like kind of feel, like they really need to look within. I want something creepy that's going to keep people on edge. Not in an ultra manipulative way, like be sad, be sad, be sad.
Right.
Like to me, that just sounds pretty. It represents pretty.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know? That represents motion. That represents action. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that represents kind of a sadness, but with the minor seventh involved. Kind of the sadness has a little more depth to it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
these things I'm talking about are intangible, you
Right.
know, but they work for me and they help me um, convey moods in my music,
Yeah. Yeah.
emotion. But yeah, I want it to sound like a cloud burst or something,
Yeah.
or I want it to sound like, do you see music in shapes? Because
Um, I
that's
see form in shapes, like overall structure.
yeah, I see music in shapes, so I actually see the shape of it,
Wow.
um, and what it should. I associate the shape of what it looks like in my mind to what it's gonna sound like, um, and that's it's kind of a very abstract way of looking at it, but that's kind of how I do it, and yeah, it's a everyone has their own internal process, their
Yeah.
language. Any kind of shape, like imagine looking at like Pro Tools,
Uh-huh.
and you see the graph of the sound going up and down.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very primitive version of what I'm talking about. And they're very abstract. It's like a thing that's way in my subconscious or something, or
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I can't really say this is it,
Yeah.
but I know what it is. It translates at a very subconscious level to music from shapes. No one's ever asked me where I had to answer that in depth, but that I just discovered that that's what happened when I was just answering it. Just
Cool.
Laura Nero used to uh, speak in colors. too. She wanted her music. I mean, imagine having a session where there's like, seven brass players or something, and you say, "Can you make it more purple?" Which is a famous story. Yeah. She- And
Make
they're
it
like,
more
"What?"
purple.
Yeah, make it more purple. And
So
they're
did
like,
she
"What?"
mean, yeah,
I don't know what she meant. I don't think they knew. I think she meant darker,
right, like warm, like
warmer.
darker but warm.
Yeah, yeah,
I've also heard you say that if you have talent, you have the obligation or duty to pursue that talent. And I think that's incredible, and it's also a hard thing to follow. So I'm wondering how
yeah.
you came up with that belief.
Whatever your belief is, you have it and it's rare, you know. So you are blessed with it. And I think it's a waste, a complete waste to not try to pursue it to the ultimate. I mean, especially it means that you will contribute something to the world of value once you have fully developed your talent, and you're not doing that when you don't
Mm-hmm.
fully develop it.
And your son is a musician, right?
Yeah, both of my sons.
Both of them. Okay.
Yeah, I have two boys. And they're both really great thinkers too. They think deeply about stuff, and they're very smart. I'm very proud of both of them.
So how did you take an active role in cultivating their musical interests?
I
Yeah.
tried to have cool music playing around the house. So I had a role, but I think it was better to have them have external teachers other than me, because it's, the having your father teach you, it probably put a lot of pressure on them. Yeah.
Were your parents musicians?
No, they were both school teachers, but they had
Oh.
incredible taste. My sister Kirsten, who is a musical playwright in New York, very respected. She and I are cut from the same cloth. I know how she thinks. She knows how I think.
Right. Did you write together as kids?
No, but we used to play a lot of games together. She's like 5 years older than me. She paid attention to me
Yeah.
and played with me, and I developed an imagination because of her.
Did you play creative games?
Yeah, yeah, creative things. I can't even remember, but a lot of it had to, like we read Greek myths a lot. She would make these stories very clear to me, and she also like would act out the music, like listening to Mozart's Symphony K40 in G minor. She acted it out a lot. She also introduced me to Laura Nero.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, no, but she's great. My other sister Joy introduced me to jazz, and was also introduced me to a lot of stuff. Minnie Riperton and Charles Stepney, uh,
Mm-hmm.
artists out of Chicago who that changed my life. So there, I was blessed with my family.
Do you feel that writing or anyone's sort of pursuit of their art or of their sort of given gifts, is that a spiritual act for you?
I mean, I personally, I believe that I'm an agnostic. So I believe that there's something there, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that there is something that gave me this talent. I don't think it was just like ones and zeros,
Right.
X's and O's. I think there's some plan or some design. That's just my personal thing. I mean, there have been times when I've been on the bandstand where we just came about the same. It was like we were one mind,
Mm-hmm.
and there's five of us, and it's like we were one mind creating this tapestry to the point where it seemed beyond mere coincidence.
Right.
Oh, we all happened to just kind of randomly think of the same thing at the same time for like 5 minutes. No, I don't think I think it's more than that. Man, I'll be so glad when this nightmare is over. 2020, I just kind of threw away, you know.
I
You
think a
know,
lot of people have, yeah.
yeah, you just got to look at the future. I think the best thing to do is to look to the future and to keep focusing on you know, realize that things are what they are right now, but keep focusing on, I don't, if, if, if there's one phrase I absolutely hate, it's the new normal. I hate that because um, it's almost saying like the new resignation, basically. Like I resign myself to this screwed up situation. It's a new
Mm-hmm.
normal. It's just normal. That's just it.
Right.
And I don't accept that. You know, um, so I look to the future. I look at being vigilant, wearing masks,
Right.
social distancing, doing all the things, washing hands, doing all the things that are necessary to stay safe, but always with the intent of going back to the real normal, actually.
Yeah. If listeners want to find you, find your music, where should they go?
They should go to billychilds.com or also billychilds at artistshare.com. I'm just in the process of self-publishing my music, so a lot of stuff is going up there right now.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope people get something out of this. It was great to actually. We've never really had a conversation in depth. If I'd have known you were going to edit it, I would have. My second language is cursing, so so
Well, I guess you made my job a little easier.
yeah, yeah, cool.
I'm really grateful to Billy for being so open about his process and reminding me that no matter how much success you have or no matter how much experience you have, creating art is a struggle. It's always a process, it's always putting pieces of the puzzle together. I think Billy also made a great distinction between struggling to create art and suffering to create art, because Billy did say that when the height of the protests, were really, when it was really distressing, he did step away and he did take time for himself, and he didn't push himself to write when he was not ready to. But then once he was ready, he continually showed up even though there was struggle. So I'm going to try to remind myself of that it's okay to struggle with your work. But if you really do feel like you are suffering, whatever that might mean to you and your mental health, emotional health, then as Billy says, it is important to step away from a bit. I will also try to remember what Billy said, that really sometimes writing is just about showing up and banging your head against the wall and just looking at your piece from every possible angle until something clicks. And you have to be patient and understand that it can be a very frustrating process, but that eventually you will see the other side of it and you will create the work that you're imagining. Thanks.